Yeah, I'm born and raised in Italy. So I used to be an athlete when I was a teenager. So I played first. I was doing ski races. Then I played tennis from when I was 12 to really when I was around 18. And then I also started doing car racing. So I started racing with cars, first with go karts, and then I moved to cars. So I have always been an athlete all my life.
I'm sure your parents loved when you were racing cars, huh?
Uh, my dad raced too, so he was racing. He has been 2 times Italian champion. So that is where the passion comes from. When I was a kid, I was going to the races during the weekend with him. But then, yeah, when it was my time, my mom was maybe not super happy.
Did any of the sports ever become like a professional endeavor, or did it never like sort of get to that point?
It never. I never became a pro 100%. But for example, when I was playing tennis, particularly from 12 to 16 years old, I was literally going to school and playing tennis. Nothing else in my life.
Yeah, and did you want to go pro? Like, was that the plan all along, or did you just look at it as something you enjoyed doing when you were a kid, but then had other plans for like your career, if you will, when you were kind of a little bit older?
Yeah, I think probably the latter. Meaning, my family always pushed me really hard to. They had this concept of you need to study. My dad used to be a lawyer. You need to become a lawyer, and if you become a lawyer, will feel good as a parent that now you have a stable job. And actually, the funny thing, then I became a lawyer, right? And I work at two very large law firms. But if you ask my mom still says to her friends that I'm a lawyer, and she doesn't tell them I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's we feel that in the Armenian Middle Eastern community, it's kind of the same thing, right? With all these ethnic parents, grandparents, you really have to be in a steady career that people know and they respect. But I feel like that's going to change. I think that our generation will probably respect entrepreneurs more than they will lawyers and doctors and engineers. Not to say that's a good or bad thing. It's how the mentality worked. How much of, I mean, clearly your parents had an impact in your profession because you ended up, you said, becoming a lawyer. Did you feel as though you were forced to become a lawyer? I mean, or that, you were forced to go to law school?
So at the time, right, the only thing I was thinking about was sport. And so that was the logical path to me. My dad owned a very small law firm in my small town. So I didn't like to study much at high school. And so when it came the time to pick college in Italy, you immediately pick law, right? It's not like in the US. And so it was just the most logical career decision. Then I was 1 year in, and I read this article about these big law firms that they were closing the biggest deals in finance in the world, big IPOs, and that sounded to me like the closest thing to sport that you could do in a professional life. And I say, look, I want to do that, but to do that, there were two conditions to even have just an interview. You need to graduate with honor, and you need to speak English. At the time, I didn't speak English, and I was not studying much. That thing really clicked. And I said, oh, yeah, I want to do that. And so the same attitude I had in sport immediately translated in my college career. And so I graduated with honor, and then I made enough money to come to the US. I went to San Diego, studied English. And then I submitted my resume, and I got in these two law firms, first one and then the other.
How long did you practice law, and what were some of the biggest sort of like takeaways from being a lawyer that you've sort of have had the opportunity to apply to entrepreneurship and running a business?
Yeah, so I practiced for around 5 years. And then the fifth year is when I started my first company. So I was doing that in the night, and that is how the business started making money. We never raised a penny, so I was able to start paying my salary since day one. But there are two things I learned there. First, working extremely hard. I mean, working in the top law firms, it's really challenging. I remember my third day of work in my life. I went to the office at 9 a.m. and I left the following day at 2 p.m. because we had the first closing. It was a major TLC, transaction. So that was a lesson learned. But the second one is to be very detail oriented, right? In law, when you read these big agreements, 150 pages, there are a lot of mechanics. You need to be perfect as a team, right? And so that is something that I still use today. And then at 8 Sleep today, we have a culture of writing. So we write substantially multiple memos per day. Every meeting has an agenda, which is very detailed. And so I really use what I have learned during those 5 years and I apply it into my current company.
Matteo, what age were you when you learned English?
I was 24, 23.
Wow. So, I mean, you hear a lot of times that like those that learn languages younger obviously pick it up faster and it's less of a challenge. How challenging was it for you to learn this whole new language in this whole new world, right? I mean, I'm sure you had heard English TV here and there, whatever, but was it something that was challenging or did it just come easy to you?
No, it was challenging. The interesting thing is since then I learned German and Spanish. Now I speak 4. Because my wife, she speaks Spanish, she's American, but we speak English and Spanish. But when I really focus on that, in 6 months is when I really learn. At school, in high school, we had 1 hour per week of English, but you don't learn anything. At the time, I didn't want to study, so I was just doing the bare minimum. But in 6 months is when I was decent enough to come to the US, and then I spent here almost a year. And I went back and my English was decent.
You mentioned starting your first business after a few years of being in law. What was the business? And did you end up, I know it was on the side, but like at what point did you end up leaving your career in law?
Yeah, so there was probably the only business bubble of the past 50 years in Italy at the time, which was in renewable energy. So the government started paying a feed-in tariff for solar energy. So a lot of private equity funds started coming to Italy to develop large utility scale solar plants. But a lot of people in Italy, they don't speak English, in particular in the south where there is more sun. And so my co-founder and I, we started developing these large utility scale solar plants, and we were selling them to private equity funds. And so I started doing this on the side. So at night, I was finishing to work around 10 p.m. at the law firm. And then from 10:30 to 2:30 a.m., I was working on my business. And I think it took around a year to start making real money at the point where we could pay our salaries. And that is when I left the law firm.
You mentioned you didn't have to like raise a penny. How did you end up funding this thing? Because I can imagine building solar plants are pretty capital intensive business. So like, how did you end up pooling money together to get it going?
Yeah, so we structured our agreements in a way where they started paying based on milestones. And so the funds were anticipating the money, and we were really focused on the part of the permits. So before construction, and then maybe we were funding a bank that would finance the building and make more money. But at the end of the day, we were not putting a penny on the table. So the only thing we needed was the money to pay our salaries and our team salaries.
Matteo, there's something that you mentioned that I think is this really important factor of entrepreneurship, which is, you had your day job, you were making money as a securities lawyer, but at night, late at night, when most people are probably going to bed or, watching Netflix or whatever, you're focused 4 or 5 hours at late night building this company. And, I think that's a true testament to being an entrepreneur. But at the same time, so Pat and I have been doing this for over 4.5 years now. I've come to the conclusion myself that I don't necessarily think that that's a healthy lifestyle, perhaps, to live. What would be your advice to those that are working perhaps a day job, 9 to 5, 8 to 5, whatever their schedule is, but want to be an entrepreneur? I mean, do you suggest what you did? Is what you did the solution or the answer to success in entrepreneurship?
I don't think it's binary. And I think it depends on what is your job, what is your passion, probably also your age, right? If you have a family or not. For me, I was still now in my mid 20s. I was really passionate about that. So I was not even feeling, oh, I have to go to work like at 10:30. It was, okay, let me meet my co-founder, my friend, and let's play with this thing and see if it ever takes off. We didn't even know what a startup was. For us, it was more, okay, there is this opportunity, we can make some extra money, let's do it.
Right.
Another way to approach it, which is what I see more often here in the US with startups, is if you have a certain idea, you should focus on that 100%, right? So you should have the courage to quit your job, focus on that. Here is possible to raise. So maybe it's family and friends at the beginning and you keep your salary very low.
Yeah. And so how did everything go? Like, how long did you run that business for, and what ultimately ended up happening with it?
Yeah, so we ran it for 2 years. We kept growing pretty well. And then the whole pipeline was acquired by a company. So it was a small exit, but good for us. And so from there, we came to the US and we replicated the same business model, but in the US. It was slightly different. So we were selling solar energy power to municipalities that they would prepay with a bond. But the concept overall was similar. We developed a large pipeline. Here we raised some money from a European investor, I believe $2 or $3 million. And then at the end, the pipeline got acquired by Panasonic. And after that is when I started Eat Sleep.
You touched on passion, and I'm curious, was this something that you were passionate about, or was it more opportunistic as a business that you was more so like a means to an end, where like you wanted to build something quickly, obviously try to have a healthy exit to then, have enough maybe capital to then go out and maybe pursue other passions that you had?
No, I think I was passionate because at the end of the day, it's climate change, right? I think we were a bit too early at the time. If you were doing this today, probably would be, because of the price of the solar panels is way lower, the opportunity could be way bigger. At the time, part of the reasons why we had to sell was that the feed-in tariff changed. And so the government was not paying anymore for that extra value. And so there was less interest from private equity funds. So we knew since from the beginning that there was a clock ticking. And so we had to grow as fast as possible and then find a buyer. And we did it. But again, when I look back in my career, if I say, look, my first two companies were in climate change and now I'm in health, I'm pretty proud of that.
Yeah. And so was it after the acquisition by Panasonic that you ended up coming up with the idea for Eat Sleep, or how did the whole kind of idea come to you? At what point did it come to you, and when did you start working on it?
Yeah, so I kind of had a similar idea, meaning I was always looking at sleep and I started wondering why Elon Musk is taking me to Mars, but I still spend a third of my life on a piece of dumb foam, right? No, I lie over these and everyone pretends to then wake up 8 hours later and be fully refreshed, energized, and ready to go. That didn't make sense to me. And so I kept iterating, or at least I kept thinking about the opportunity there. And then with my co-founders, with my co-founder Max, who is the CTO, we came up with the idea.
So was it from the beginning to like completely disrupt like the way people look at sleep and like all that, or did it kind of start off, because that's obviously huge, massive idea. Everyone sleeps, right? But it's such a massive idea, and we'll talk more about the details there. But was that the plan from the beginning, or did it start off with a very like specific, smaller kind of thing?
So the fully I had the fully backed idea since the 2017, which is when I wrote a memo. So probably earlier than that, but in 2017 I wrote a memo that then led to raise our Series A, I think, from Khosla Ventures. I still have that memo, and if you join the company, that's the first thing we will send you. And that is where we fully scoped our vision of sleep compression and saving your life. Because at the end of the day, our goal is to make sure that you can sleep faster. What if you could sleep only 6 hours and get more rest than when you were sleeping 8 hours? And two, even if you sleep only 6 hours, what else can we do during that time? And the idea is to scan your body to detect early signs of illnesses and save your life.
And so obviously there's a lot of like technical like things that go into something like this, and so many different data points. Kind of coming from a law background and solar energy, all that stuff. How did you start kind of wrapping your head around all this and knowing what you would build? Because it's one thing to have an idea, but it's another thing to like actually execute on it and being able to say like, I know what I'm building and this is what I'm building. Like, what were you like inspired by other things, or like how did you end up kind of formulating all that?
Yeah. So for sure, at the beginning, we were very naive. At least I was very naive, right? You don't know what you don't know, and otherwise you wouldn't do it at that stage. So what I started doing is, because I have always been in performance and recovery as an athlete, I started reading a lot of medical research and clinical papers. And so step one was to really develop sensors that can capture your biometrics while you're asleep. Then as we started doing that, customers kept talking about temperature, and they kept saying, look, I sleep hot, I fight with my partners because we have different temperature preferences. So we started looking into that. At the beginning, we didn't have the money to develop the cooling, which is now our core feature. And so we started by focusing only on the sensors. And then at a certain point, when I wrote my memo and we achieved a certain level of growth, is when Khosla Ventures invested in us, and they gave us the money to really build the heating and cooling system.
Matteo, was the goal from the get-go to start a new mattress company, or was it to start a tech company that people can put on their existing mattress? I mean, what was that original thought of the product?
Yeah, it has always been like a wearable, non-wearable. We have the DNA of a wearable company, of an Apple Watch. It's just a different form factor, and that is what makes us unique. And so it has always been that. And even today, the cover is like the largest majority of our sales. So the mattress is really a small fraction of what we sell.
Right.
At the end of the day, customers, they have their own bed, they like it, they put our technology, they transform it from dumb to smart with our cover.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say, is that I feel like the barrier to entry to get somebody to purchase an entirely new mattress in such a crowded space already, which I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, is a lot more challenging than, hey, you already have your bed. Perhaps you think it's comfortable. Maybe it's not. Maybe you'll change your mind, whatever. But here's something that you can supplement it with, and also creates, I assume, a lead funnel for you in case they are getting bad sleep, that, hey, maybe our mattress is that solution on top of obviously the technology that we're providing you here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we offer again the cover, that is the largest majority of our sales, and also the mattress. The mattress is, if you're already changing it, just buy the Lamborghini of mattresses. Here it is. But if you like yours, you don't have to change it. Just add our technology on top. And people like that flexibility.
You mentioned these like sensors and things that you were looking to build. Like, did the technology exist to a certain extent already, or did you have to like build it from the ground up without any real like examples or historic data or anything to like look into?
So the type of sensors already existed and they were used in hospitals, but no one built a consumer product with this kind of sensors, and no one built it in a Wi-Fi connected solution that you can control from wherever you want in the world. And with the data processing on the cloud, on AWS, right? So we took something that existed, again, on a small scale only for hospitals, but it was proven to work at a medical level. And we made that consumer friendly, and we applied ML and AI to it.
What were some of the initial challenges that you faced? And we can keep this like two parts: one with the company, but also maybe one with you as a leader of the company, that maybe you can share for those who are maybe just starting off, or could maybe like relate to some of those challenges that you might have gone through.
So at the company level, it was definitely hardware. At a certain point, this is a funny story. Immediately after Y Combinator, we just closed our seed round for $6 million. things were not happening in China. So I go to my wife and I say, "Oh, I have to go to China to fix manufacturing." And she says, "Oh, cool. When do you go?" And I say, "Tomorrow." And she says, "Oh, nice. And when are you coming back?" And I say, "Once I have fixed it." So bottom line, I stayed in China for 3 or 4 months, or a couple of months, to fix that. So that was one of the challenges at the company level. Then, as a CEO, I think two things. One, obviously, I didn't have any experience in hardware, right? So hiring for hardware, understanding what we really needed was probably the biggest challenge for me. And I think I made a bunch of mistakes there. Um, Mistakes that we were able to solve. It just delayed certain things. The other thing was that I was coming from a very different environment, right, which was sort of finance. And I studied and graduated in Europe. And so when it was time to raise money at the beginning before YC was really hard because there was almost no check box in my career that can prove that I'm real, right? Oh, this guy is this Italian guy who comes out of nowhere, and we start giving him money. And so at the end of the day, the US is friendly and you can prove yourself. And hopefully, to a small degree, I was able to do it. But at the beginning, definitely, there was some skepticism about, okay, who's this guy?
Matteo, I'm curious about you and your kind of sleep habits prior. Was there anything that beyond just other people's ideas of how much sleep they should be getting or your general consensus? Did you have any issues with sleep, and were there any issues caused? And if you did, were there any issues that caused the lack of sleep that further kind of motivated you to start a company like this?
Yeah. So first I have what is called restless legs. So this feeling in the middle of the night that you need to move your legs. It's a sort of cramp, so you need to get out of bed. So that was one. And two, I have always been obsessed with efficiency. And so I started thinking, can I sleep less so I have more time awake? And that is how sleep compression, the idea of sleep compression started. And from there, I expanded it into health and body scanning.
And what were the results for you when you were doing that?
After 8 sleep or before?
After.
Yeah. So with 8 sleep, I'm able, obviously, I learned a lot about my sleep habits. I became a way better sleeper. So I pay way more attention to all the metrics. And through temperature, I'm also helping my restless legs. There are still other factors that have an impact, like nutrition. But at least I was able to partially reduce it.
Interesting. So you mentioned like having to go to China and make sure the manufacturing was all being done right. At what point, I guess at the point that the product was finally ready, how did you start going about getting your initial customers?
Yeah, so first we sold 8,000 units in pre-orders. And you could say, oh, that's really cool. In reality, it's not. And I tell you why. Because you need to build them when you don't know how to build. So the quality is okay. But more than anything is you set up everything with the supplier to ship these 8,000 units as quickly as possible, which is still late, but it's still a meaningful volume. The second after you have shipped the 8,000 units, you start moving, I don't know, I invent a number, 100 units a month. And so you start having problems with also your suppliers because before you had a lot of manufacturing lines to build 8,000 units. And now you're telling me that you build 100 a month. So you go through that part that in China they don't like. But we were able to put patches.
How do you get 8,000 people to buy this thing almost, I don't want to say instantly, but super early? One of the hardest things about a product or product launch is obviously getting the word out or people knowing about it. I mean, what did you do? And perhaps for the entrepreneurs that are listening, what can they do, when they're launching a product or in the early stages of developing new products or developing new, whatever it may be in their company? How did you guys get the word out? How did it spread so quickly?
Yeah. So first of all, we did a crowdfunding campaign. And at the time, Indiegogo and Kickstarter, they were a big deal, right? So it was a different time for hardware. I don't know if it would be possible to achieve the same today. But we did Indiegogo. The campaign went really well. At the time, a lot of media picked up the news because the product at the time was really, really innovative, right? It was at the peak of the IoT system, but we were the first one in the bedroom. And so we were covered by media across the whole globe. I think in one day we got more than 150 articles
Wow.
about us.
You mentioned innovation, and oftentimes what we see is anytime a new company comes out with something that is very innovative, right? Like the society hasn't quite seen it yet, or they don't even really know what it is yet. And then once it starts taking off, you see a lot of new entrants into the industry, competitors coming in. And one way to obviously prevent certain, competition is not always a bad thing, but being able to prevent other people from copying your technology is obviously patents and things like that. Is that something that you have had to do? And I'm just curious, have you seen a lot of competitors even come into the space since you have?
So in hardware, you put some attention on patents just because I think you can and you should. But at the end of the day, you just win against competition by executing faster, executing really well and faster. If you need to rely on patents, you have bigger problems, right? And then maybe they pay you a small license, but you're not going to build a large company on that. So yeah, we have patents and we have a great patent lawyer. We after we raise the money, we just hire the best and we have that. But again, I almost don't think of that as a real technological moat. We need to win because we ship the best product faster than anyone else.
There's something I'm curious about. I saw you were wearing a Whoop, and I know Pat and I are also wearing ours. And you have everything, right? Yeah, and we've had Will on our show as well, and he's obviously doing great things with Whoop across the globe. When a lot of these things came out, whether it was the Apple Watch or the Whoop, the Fitbit, 8 Sleep, etc., all these essentially health and wellness tracking devices. I'm curious whether it was in the past or in the present, or if people are talking about it for the future. Has there been any anxiety around people knowing almost too much about their health and almost, worrying that, oh my God, I'm not getting enough sleep, or oh my God, my heart rate's risen, or oh my God, I'm, not recovering enough, or, it's so I'm too hot right? Is that causing any panic in people, or do people generally want to know those things?
So two things is a great question. Two things. First, there is a small subset of people that might have the challenge you're surfacing. I would call it less than 5%, probably less than 2%. The big difference between us and other wearables is in our specific case, we do the job for you. Meaning, we report you the data, fine, that is table stake with all the other wearables. But what 8 Sleep does is we keep changing the temperature multiple times per night to maximize your sleep. And that is the biggest value because you do nothing and you just wake up more refreshed. Mm-hmm. We improve your HRV. We have hard evidence that within a week, almost 50% of our customers, they see a 10% improvement in HRV, which means almost like being 6 years younger. We have evidence we will show very soon in a matter of weeks that we can meaningfully improve your sleep. And this is proven with a clinical study or a clinical sleep index. And we do all that for you without you doing anything. And so for us, we overcome even the 2% of people that might get anxious about their data.
Did anybody early on when you were launching 8 Sleep, or again, even now, did they care about the privacy aspect of, I'm sure, I know you went to law school, I went to law school, so this always comes up, of the privacy in the bedroom? I know you guys are not tracking certain things, but what did they say about that, or how do you guys counteract that?
The way we counteract it is just by applying the best and most standard policies that any other wearable company would use, right? Because it would be the same if you have an Apple Watch or a Whoop or an Aura. So I think now there is a very high baseline for all these companies about the treatment of data, and we are all matching that.
You mentioned you've had to raise money for the company. First with Y Combinator, I'm assuming you said Khosla Ventures, and I'm not sure if you've also raised more since then, but how's that experience been like for you? Are there any learnings that you can share with maybe founders who are like looking to raise or are currently in the fundraising process?
Yeah, overall we have raised 160 million, 160. So Y Combinator, Khosla Ventures, Funders Fund, SoftBank, General Catalyst, Valor Equity Partners, who was the first investor in Tesla and SpaceX. So hardware is hard to raise money because obviously it's a very complicated business. While instead, if you have a SaaS business, it's way easier, right? For investors, you get better multiples. So if you really want to go in hardware, go for that, but make sure you're passionate. Make sure that probably there is a recurring revenue attached to that.
Matteo, one thing that I think about is with companies like, again, 8 Sleep, Whoop, you mentioned Aura, or Apple's, health, fitness kind of product lines, is that it's one of those things that the success of it will be proven over a longer period of time, right? Yes, you're saying that there's an immediate, impact to your sleep and your HRV, which I believe is heart rate variability. But the longer 8 Sleep survives and longer Whoop survives and the longer these businesses go and the more metrics and the more data they have, the stronger they become. So in dealing with venture capitalists, investors, etc., obviously they want to see their money tomorrow, right? Like the quicker the better. That's always any investor wants to kind of see their money faster because of the whole time value of money. But what is there to be said, and what do you tell these investors and others about building what I assume to be more so a business that you want to see beyond your lifetime, that sticks around, that impacts lives, etc.?
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's really, really good angle. So when I think about our company, I literally always think in a 20 years horizon, because when you do hardware, first you need time, but more than anything, all these companies like us, we are innovating in a space where we are transforming preventative health. And so, yeah, sometimes you might find people that say, oh, but you're not super accurate with my sleep. You are only X% accurate. And it might be true today, but if you look at the progression, maybe that X was half 1 year ago or 2 years ago, right? And so all these devices are becoming medical grade devices, and it's happening now, right? Our accuracy and detecting your heart rate is 95% compared to a medical grade ECG, and you don't have to wear anything, and you don't have to go to the doctor, right? So companies like us and these wearables, they will become healthcare companies in the matter of a couple of years. And so our value will be exponential, and the will be different. Investors understand that, and they know that between here and the 20 years, they're very likely going to be an IPO if we do well, or there could be an acquisition. So as long as you keep growing with good and healthy margins year over year, they are supportive. The key thing you see in us, in Aura and Whoop, is to prove that there is a recurring revenue model that can help the business to be healthier.
So a few years ago, I remember I was just like, and I'm sure a lot of people will resonate with this. I used to snore heavily, and I mean, I still, when I drink, or when I drink mostly, I'll still snore that evening. But I remember going to a sleep test where they put all these like nodes and all this other shit on you, and you have horrible sleep anyways during that test because there's all this fucking shit on you, right? So I don't know how they measure things, and I think they said that it was a very mild case of sleep apnea, and they ended up, even though we're getting personal here, I have a point. They ended up saying that I had some sort of kissing tonsils, and they had to remove my tonsils and work with the uvula, all this fun stuff. Just thinking about that, I'm thinking to myself, with 8 Sleep, do you foresee there being other sort of hardware that you guys come out with for those that do have problems such as sleep apnea or insomnia or restless legs or all these other sleeping issues, which, I mean, can or cannot be neurological, I assume? Or is it just going to be, we're a tracking system, we'll let other companies figure out how to solve your problems beyond what we can do for you?
So the current device can already see sleep apnea in the back end. So it's a matter of, okay, what legal rules do we need to comply with, right, to then disclose and inform you. But the bottom line is, you will not have to go through that terrible experience where you're going to sleep cleaning, they cover you with sensors to detect something.
Right.
We are going to do that for you without you even knowing it and without wearing anything. The same will apply to any cardiovascular disease. We can already see arrhythmia, we can already see atrial fibrillation in our backend, and without you, again, wearing anything. So to answer to your question is 100% yes, companies like us and 8 Sleep will do everything that you need to maximize your sleep performance.
Yeah.
And this is on sleep. Outside sleep, because we have so much space, you stand still in the same place every single night for multiple years. We will add so many sensors that you can't even imagine of, and we will be able to scan your body and detect any sort of illness.
Do you imagine a world in which 8 Sleep also has a retail kind of stores and people are coming there to do some level of testing, and then because I mean that's how the lab experience was. Is I mean you go there and you get all these damn nodes on you, but I mean I could almost foresee it. And you talk about being a healthcare company or it becoming a healthcare company of doing that yourselves, or even working and partnering with hospitals to be on their mattresses while patients are there. So I'm just curious about kind of the short/long-term plans for 8 Sleep beyond what it is today.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we'll move in that direction, right? There will be more remote clinical trials that will happen through devices like ours. People like you, maybe in the future, you will just get, your insurance company will ship you a cover. They say, install this, and we will let you know within 5 days if you have sleep apnea.
Right.
All that is going to happen. And so also the type of business will not be purely a consumer business, but hopefully insurance companies and payers and employers will subsidize part of this.
Thinking about hardware and software, and obviously 8 Sleep has both components, like looking at examples like Apple, for example, who's done an incredible job of building just a sustainable business around both. And they're constantly, innovating on both hardware and software. Do you see like this industry in 8 Sleep having that type of impact on the world where kind of it's this constant development and there's so much to do on both ends?
Yes, I do. And I think the big advantage we have is while wearables, they're all fighting for your wrist or maybe for one of your fingers. And so there is a lot of competition. There is no competition in our form factor. But the advantage of our form factors, the advantages are two. One, we have a lot of space, which means we can embed sensors that no wearable company can use, right? Because they don't have the space. And they even don't have the power. We are plugged to the wall. They need to rely on a battery. That's one. And two is our the fact that you use our product every single day for multiple years. Even if you don't open the app, you're still sleeping on your bed, unless you're traveling. This means that we still have your data and we can come back to you to let you know if there is anything that you need to know about your health. Mm-hmm. This doesn't apply with wearables because 50% of their customers stop using the wearable within 6 months.
Right. And obviously, we're spending a third of our time sleeping and 2/3 of our time awake, which is, I'm assuming, the angle that a lot of these other wearable companies are taking with like the wrist and the finger. But you mentioned it earlier that sleep is not just limited to that, 7-8 hours or 6 to 8 hours or whatever it is. There's also other things that you could be doing during the day that affect your sleep. And so do you see 8 Sleep kind of moving into anything that, is more like during the active points of your day?
Yes, but the way we will do it, we already started doing it a few weeks ago. So now we are able to collect the data from any other wearable. And so you will see, your Aura or Garmin or Peloton data in the 8 Sleep app. And our machine learning and AI engines, they combine it with our own data. And then we provide you with insights. So the answer is yes, but instead of developing an hardware product for the day, we just leverage the 50 wearable companies out there. Let's just get the data from them, connect it to our data, and provide you value.
Matteo, this might be a stupid question, but I truly don't know the answer. If there's 2 people sleeping on the bed and you have one cover, how does that work?
So each side of the bed is completely independent. So each person has its own temperature, and they also have their own metrics.
How about if my spouse encroaches on my property?
So first, if your side is cold and your side is warm, she will not come. So you can protect your side.
Got it.
But yeah, no, as long as each of them is on their side, we will have a high definition of their metrics.
So where can people, if you want to just kind of shameless plug here, but where can people learn about you guys, buy the products or test them out, whatever, however it works, if you wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we are on 8sleep.com, 8 like the number, just in letters, so EIGHT sleep.com. We have two products. One is a cover that you can install onto any mattress. The other is the whole mattress. We cool and heat each side of the bed to maximize your sleep, and we also pick up all your biometrics. So check it out. We have thousands and thousands of people raving about us and reporting better sleep.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Well, Matteo, we can't thank you enough for hanging out with us and spending your evening sharing your story and more about 8Sleep and all the kind of takeaways from the space. And we're excited to see the company continue to evolve, and we'll be following along. But hopefully we can get together in person someday. And this has been awesome.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Cheers.
Thank you, Matteo.